Oh, Lady Slicercake, what a fortuitous encounter. Oh, is it, Lady Garlic Bread? Yes. There's quite a rumor going on around you, quite the scandal. Me? I've heard it said that you and Master Allo have engaged in fornications, and unless I am mistaken, you have boldly claimed that you are asexual. Well, word is out. I have engaged in fornications, and I am asexual. Huh?
Do asexual people have sex? Let's go to Ace Camp. One of the big misconceptions about asexual folks is that we never have sex. Ever. We don't kiss, we don't cuddle, nothing. Zip, zilch, nada. While this is true for some asexual folks, it isn't true for everyone. Some ace folks do have sex. Some have a lot of it. So, let's talk about it. Identity isn't behavior. So this misconception about asexual folks and sex stems from the assumption that sexual identity and sexual behavior are the same thing. And they just aren't. Sexual identity describes who you feel sexual attraction for. So if you're heterosexual, you feel sexual attraction to folks of the opposite gender. If you're homosexual, you experience sexual attraction for people of the same gender. Bi folks and pansexual folks are sexually attracted to people of all gender expressions. Asexual folks rarely or don't experience sexual attraction at all. So these identities describe innate characteristics. They describe a fundamental way a person relates to the world and other people. They're important parts of who we are and how we relate to the world. Sexual behavior is different. It describes the kind of sex you're actually having. It's what you do, not who you are. For most people, these two experiences line up. The kind of person you feel sexual attraction for is also the kind of person that you are having actual sex with. This package deal experience is so common that it is considered the cultural default experience. It's assumed everyone will experience that. And regardless of your sexual identity, the dominant culture assumes that your sexual identity and your sexual behavior will match. So the dominant culture encourages this correlation, so much so that it even encourages it in those sexual identities that it doesn't always favor. But this doesn't have to be true. Your sexual identity and your sexual behavior can diverge. You can be homosexual and choose not to have any sex of any kind. You could be heterosexual and choose to occasionally have sex with someone of the same gender. You can be bisexual and choose to only have sex with someone of one gender. Sexual behavior is strongly influenced, but not solely determined by sexual identity. So, some asexual people have sex. So the way asexual folks relate to sexual behavior isn't a monolith. Like all good things, it's a spectrum. At one end of the spectrum are asexual folks who do not have sex. At the farthest end of the spectrum are folks who identify as sex repulsed. So sex repulsed folks experience really strong negative feelings about sex. So this can include not just the thought of having sex, but the idea of sex in general. For some sex repulsed folks, this feeling can be so strong that it becomes physical. They can experience things like physical disgust, shakes, nausea. Nearby on the spectrum, but a little bit different, are sex-averse folks. Sex-averse folks also experience negative feelings about sex, but it's more focused on the idea of them having sex. They can have a comfort level with the idea of sex or people talking about sex. Some sex-averse folks may feel comfortable talking about and joking about sex themselves. They're just not comfortable having any. Sex-neutral folks are in the middle of the spectrum. They don't experience strong feelings in either direction about sexual behavior and activity. There are no strong negative feelings about sex, but there aren't any positive feelings about it either. Sex neutral folks can feel this way about both the idea of having sex with another person and the idea of sex in general. Some sex neutral folks choose not to have sex, but some sex neutral folks do, for a variety of reasons, like having a child with their partner, or expressing some emotional connection, or another kind of attraction. At the other end of the spectrum are sex-favorable folks. Sex-favorable folks enjoy the act and the idea of sex. They don't experience sexual attraction, but they find pleasure in the act of sex for other reasons. Maybe they find the experience of sex pleasurable on a physical level. They have sex to please their partners. They have sex to express other kinds of attraction, like aesthetic attraction, emotional attraction, intellectual attraction. Sex-favorable folks can have a little bit of sex or a lot of sex. But being sex-favorable doesn't mean you're down for anything. Just like allosexual folks, sex-favorable folks can have very specific boundaries around the kinds of sexual activities they are comfortable with. Now, all of this isn't as rigidly clear-cut and defined as all that. The way you, as an individual, relates to sexual behavior doesn't neatly have to fall under one of these categories. You may experience a mix of these, or it might change depending on the situation. All of that is valid. These categories aren't meant to be prescriptive. They're meant to help ACE folks communicate their feelings and experience to other people. What about other kinds of intimacy? These descriptors for relationships to sexual behavior aren't just useful for sexual acts. They can be useful for other kinds of intimacy as well. Things like kissing, cuddling, touching. Things like masturbating or watching porn. Asexual folks can have a range of feelings about these activities too. And sometimes they'll have more permissive feelings about these behaviors than they do about sexual activity proper. But there are no hard and fast rules here. Each asexual person can set their own boundaries around what kind of sexual behavior and intimacy they're willing to have. And none of those boundaries determine how ace someone is. Behavior isn't identity, so don't go thinking someone isn't ace enough because they have sex. And don't think someone isn't ace enough if they don't fit your preconceived notions about the kinds of sexual behaviors asexual people should or shouldn't participate in. So it's important we take a second here to talk about consent. You have the right to set whatever boundaries you want to set around what you do with your body. And your consent is required for any kind of intimacy or sexual activity you participate in. No exceptions. No excuses. Don't let anyone tell you that you just need to relax, or you just need to give it a try, or that sex is natural, so you just have to do it. You don't. Your boundaries are your boundaries, and you don't have to justify them or defend them. So, do asexual people have sex? Well, some do, some don't. It's up to the individual. An asexual person's relation to sexual behavior is entirely specific to them. And the sexual behavior they choose to engage in does not define their sexual identity. So basically, if an ace person says they're ace, just believe them. And finally, remember, consent is king. Or queen, or non-binary gender fluid regent. And one more time for good measure. Yeah? We like it? We like it? We love it. Hey, thanks for supporting the channel. Happy that you are here. Make sure you like, subscribe, click the bell, do all the things one does on YouTube so that I can see you back here at the next video. See you then.